She said, "It just happened, don't try to stop me," while leaving with another man. For a second I honestly thought she was joking. My brain did that thing where it lags, like a video buffering, because nothing about the scene in front of me made sense. She had my old duffel bag slung over her shoulder, the navy one I used to take to soccer, stuffed so full the zipper bowed. Behind her at the curb, the Uber idled with its hazards on, and this guy, him, leaned against the passenger door like he wasn't part of a small apocalypse. The hallway light above our front door buzzed faintly. I could hear our neighbors, TV through the wall, some canned laughter track, while my entire chest felt like someone had scooped it out with a dull spoon. "I'm not joking, Daniel," she added, like she could see the disbelief on my face. Her fingers were white-knuckled around the strap. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The draft from the open door pushed cool night air across my bare feet, and I became stupidly aware that I was still in the grey joggers she hated, dad pants she called them. I must have looked ridiculous, hair sticking up old band t-shirt, holding a tea towel in one hand because I'd literally been drying dishes when the knock came. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Harder for who?" I finally managed. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, too calm for the way my ribs felt like they were rattling. "You, or me, watching you walk out with him." I jerked my chin toward the guy outside. He looked away, suddenly fascinated by something on his shoe. She flinched. "Don't start, Danny, please." I hated that she still called me that. Hated the way it slid out of her mouth on autopilot, like we were still us. It was a Wednesday night when all this exploded, but if I'm honest, the fuse had been burning for a long time. We'd been together 6 years, married for 2. I'm 32M, she's 30F, I'll call her Emma. The guy leaning against the Uber like a coward in a denim jacket, that's Lucas. I knew his name long before that night. Emma and I met in the most unromantic way possible, in the queue at Centrelink when we were both 23 and broke. I was between casual contracts, she'd just been dropped from a retail job, and the line had snaked out the door into the sunlight. I remember she was wearing this faded red hoodie with the words "Be kind" cracked across the back, and she kept shifting from foot to foot like she wanted to be anywhere else. When the line lurched forward and she nearly bumped into me, she muttered, "Sorry, I hate this place," under her breath. "Who does?" I'd said. The smell of old carpet and despair really ties it together. She laughed, this little surprised sound, like she hadn't expected anything funny that morning. We started talking. 10 minutes later I knew she wanted to study graphic design but couldn't afford the fees yet. She hated coriander, and her ex had called her too much one week and too distant the next. 40 minutes later, we were sitting on the steps outside sharing a packet of cheap biscuits, complaining about job ads that wanted 5 years' experience for minimum wage. "What do you do?" she asked, crumbs on her lip. "Project coordination mostly," I said. "Making spreadsheets nobody reads." She smiled. "Sexy." "Obviously." We swapped numbers almost as an afterthought. "We can send each other the worst job ads we find," she'd said, tapping my name into her cracked phone. "Turn it into a game." We did, and then the game turned into, "Hey, want to grab coffee?" And, "Hey, want to see this band?" And eventually, "Hey, do you just want to leave a toothbrush at mine because this is getting silly?" From the beginning, Emma made life feel louder. She talked with her hands, laughed with her whole body, cried at adverts for dog food. She'd play music in the kitchen and dance while stirring pasta, one sock on, one sock off. She'd send me photos of weird cloud shapes and write, "This one looks like a duck if a duck had anxiety." I grew up in a house where you didn't talk about feelings, you just turned the TV up. Emma was the first person who looked at me and said, "Okay, but what do you want?" and then waited for an answer. We weren't perfect, but we fit. When I finally landed a semi-stable job in logistics, she cheered louder than my own parents. When she got into TAFE for design, I bought her a second-hand drawing tablet and hid it under her pillow. When her old Corolla died, we shared my beat-up Mazda and learned the choreography of car-sharing schedules. 3 years in, we moved into the little townhouse I'm currently packing barefoot. It isn't much, 2 bedrooms, yellowing blinds, perpetually squeaky stairs, but it was ours. We painted one wall in the spare room a soft teal for the studio and strung fairy lights above the bed. We adopted a rescue cat, Pickles, who decided Emma was his human and tolerated me as furniture. We got married on a sunny afternoon in a park because we couldn't afford a venue. Her dress was from ASOS, my suit was hired. Our parents cried anyway. When we said our vows, hers went. "I promise not to steal all the doona. I promise to laugh at your bad puns and send you memes when we're in the same room. And I promise that when life gets hard, I'll still choose you, every day." I believed her. Enter Lucas. I first heard his name about a year ago. I was stirring a pot of bolognese. She was sitting at the counter, scrolling through her phone and half eating grated cheese out of the bowl. This agency I'm freelancing for just brought in a new art director, she said. Lucas something. Apparently he used to work in Berlin. He's very, I only drink filter coffee energy. I smirked. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Depends, she said, on whether his notes are helpful or just pretentious. Over the next few months, his name came up in that casual, background character way someone does when they're in your partner's orbit. Lucas wants to push the color palette more. Lucas said my layouts were brave. I can't tell if that's a compliment. Lucas played us this weird Icelandic band in the studio today, and now I'm obsessed. There was nothing in the way she said it that set alarm bells off. They were colleagues. She also talked about a copywriter named Sal and an account manager named Priyanka, people from the office. The first time I saw him in person was at her agency's end-of-year drinks. She asked if I wanted to come meet the chaos, as she put it. The bar was one of those industrial chic places in the city, with exposed brick and Edison bulbs everyone takes the same photos of. Emma's team clustered around a tall table covered in empty glasses and half-eaten chips. That's him, she murmured, nudging me with her elbow as a guy in a denim jacket came back from the bar carrying a tray of drinks. Lucas. He was exactly what she'd described, late 30s maybe. Longish brown hair tied up, wire-framed glasses, a couple of tattoos peeking out from under his sleeves. He had the kind of face that looks earnest by default. Emma, he grinned when he saw us. You made it, and you brought the famous husband. I never know what to do with that line, like I'm some myth. Daniel, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, confident. Lucas, he replied. This one is a genius, you know. He jerked his head toward Emma. Emma rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. He says that when I agree with him, she said. Only when you're right, he shot back. They bantered easily, comfortable. I remember feeling relieved, actually. If anything, Lucas looked more like a slightly dorky older brother than some Lothario. I watched the two of them talk shop, all design jargon and industry gossip, and felt a bit out of my depth but not threatened. I drank my beer, laughed when she looped me in, went home with her, kissed her goodnight. Life continued. The cracks didn't start with Lucas. They started with us, quietly, the way most cracks do. After the pandemic, my job got more demanding. Supply chains went to hell, everyone wanted everything yesterday, and my boss discovered he could send emails at 10 p.m. Money was tight, so I didn't feel like I could push back much. Emma's freelance work picked up too. She started doing more after-hours projects to build her portfolio. Late nights in the studio room, headphones on, coffee mug leaving circles on the desk. We became two people who passed each other in the hallway with love you thrown over a shoulder instead of sitting down to actually talk. We still had good days, lazy Sundays with pancakes, laughing at some dumb Netflix show, but there was a stretch in there where my main interaction with her was. Have you fed the cat? Yeah, have you put the bins out? I noticed little things, that she seemed more restless, that she snapped quicker when I forgot something, that she sighed, long and heavy, when I talked about maybe looking into a mortgage in a couple of years. One night, lying in bed, she said into the dark, "Do you ever feel like we grew up too fast?" I blinked. What do you mean? Like, she rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. We went from broke kids at Centrelink to married couple with a car loan in, 5 years. I blinked and suddenly we're Googling interest rates and talking about oven warranties. I tried to joke, hey, that oven warranty saved our ass when it tried to explode last winter. She huffed a laugh, but it sounded thin. I know, sometimes I miss feeling spontaneous. I miss not knowing what the next 5 years look like. What do you think they look like? I asked. She was quiet for a beat too long. I don't know, she said eventually. That's kind of my point. We left it there. I told myself it was just a quarter-life crisis thing. Looking back, that was the first time I think she voiced something that would later become, it just happened. A few months after that, the phone stuff started. Emma had always been pretty open with her phone. We weren't the type to snoop, but she'd happily chuck hers at me and say, "Can you reply to Sal and say, looks good?" while she was cooking. Her passcode was my birthday for a year, which I teased her about being a security risk. Then quietly that changed. She started keeping her phone face down on the table. She'd take it with her to the bathroom. The first couple of times I heard it buzz and saw the way she snatched it up, thumb moving fast, I brushed it off. Everyone gets private messages. Everyone has group chats their partner isn't part of. Then one Sunday morning, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to look, but my eyes flickered over, and I saw his name. Lucas last night was, wow. My stomach clenched. Before I could stop myself, I reached for it. The screen locked. At some point, she'd added Face ID and turned off message previews. I put it back like it burned me and sat there on the edge of the bed, listening to the water run, feeling like something terrible had just slotted into place. I didn't confront her straight away. I wish I could say I did, that I marched into the bathroom and demanded answers. Instead, I spent the next 3 days doing Olympic-level mental gymnastics. Maybe they went to some gallery opening and he's talking about a show. Maybe last night refers to a project deadline they hit. If I ask, I'll sound crazy. I don't want to be the jealous husband who freaks out anytime a dude texts his wife. That week, she worked late a lot. We're crashing to get this campaign out the door, she said, eyes shadowed. I brought her dinner at the agency once. Lucas was there, hunched over his desk, and when he looked up and saw me, his whole face rearranged into polite warmth. Daniel, he said, you're a saint, feeding our overworked staff. Emma came to meet me at reception, gave me a quick kiss. I watched the way his eyes flicked to that point, then away. In the car home, I said, you and Lucas seem close. She shrugged. We work together a lot. He's my boss, technically. Do you like him? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She frowned, as a person or like. Like, I said, instantly regretting how juvenile it sounded. She laughed. Oh my God, are we 12? Just answer, I said, smiling to take the edge off. She shook her head. He's not my type, she said. Relax. I did a little, enough to push it back into that part of my brain labeled things we'll laugh about later. Then came the conference. She told me about it a month in advance. Some design conference in Melbourne her agency was sending her to, 3 nights away, panel discussions, networking, blah blah. You should go, I said immediately. That's huge. I don't know, she replied, chewing her lip. It's kind of last minute, and I'd have to share a room with a coworker because of the budget thing. That sounds like a UN Sal complaining about client sleepover, I said. Win-win, she smiled. You're sure you're okay with it? Of course, I said. We'll be fine. Pickles and I will order takeaway and watch football. She went, sent me photos the first night of the conference center, of a neon sign that said create something meaningful, of her name badge. I sent back supportive gifs, told her I was proud. On the second night, she didn't text much. Phone's dying, long day, talk tomorrow Roman 20, she wrote around 7 p.m. At 11 p.m., half asleep on the couch, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our joint bank account. I glanced at it lazily, then sat up. Card purchase, $18.50, Cockatoo Bar, Melbourne CBD. Emma didn't drink cocktails. She got tipsy off one-cider and hated loud CBD bars. I knew because we'd tried that phase once, early in our relationship, and she'd spent the night shouting I can't hear anything in my ear. I opened Find My, stared at the dot that was my wife. It hovered not at her hotel, but a couple of streets away, then moved slowly. Again, my first instinct wasn't she's cheating. It was panic. Is she safe? Is she drunk and lost? Did she get in the wrong Uber? I called, no answer. I texted, everything okay? No response. At some point, I dozed off. I woke at 3:40 a.m. with my neck aching and my phone on my chest. No new messages. Her location had returned to the hotel. The next day, she sent a breezy sorry babe, long night, panel dinner went forever, my phone died text. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a full minute before I replied, as long as you're okay. Here's the thing about doubt. Once it roots, it doesn't stay small. It grows, wrapping itself around everything. When she came home from Melbourne, she was different. Not dramatically, but enough that I felt like I was hugging someone who'd moved a few centimeters to the left. She was over-affectionate the first night, kissing me, pulling me into bed with an urgency that felt more like distraction than desire. Missed you, she whispered against my neck. I missed you too, I said, and I did, but underneath it was this low hum of who else did you miss? A few weeks later, I found the receipt. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a warranty in the drawer where we keep all that kind of stuff. Instead of the toaster paperwork, I pulled out an envelope with conference docs scribbled on it in her handwriting. Inside were crumpled meal receipts, her lanyard, a program booklet, and tucked between 2 pages, a folded invoice from the hotel. 1 room, 2 guests. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The check-in date matched the conference. The checkout date did too. The total was more than it should have been if it was just her half of a shared corporate room. And there in black and white at the bottom, under billing contact, was her agency's name, and under special requests, a note: late checkout requested by guest, Lucas B. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper shaking in my hands, and felt something inside me finally, irrevocably crack. By the time Emma got home that evening, I'd rehearsed 100 versions of the conversation in my head. In all of them, I was calm, measured, devastatingly articulate. In reality, my voice shook and I held the paper like a detective in a bad cop show. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the invoice as she shrugged her coat off. She stared at it. Color drained from her face so fast it was like watching ink spill out of water. "Where did you?" "In the drawer I cut in, under conference docs. Kind of ironic." She swallowed. It's from Melbourne." "I can read," I said. "Why does it say 1 room, 2 guests, and why is Lucas's name on it?" Her eyes darted everywhere but my face. "The agency messed up the booking," she said quickly. There was an issue with the room allocation, and we had to share. It was just for 1 night." I let the silence hang for a second. "So you shared a room with Lucas?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "There was nothing else available. Daniel, I swear, it wasn't some romantic getaway. We were exhausted. We literally just slept." "Just slept," I echoed, "like last night was, wow." Her mouth fell open. A flash of something, anger, panic, crossed her face. "You looked at my messages." "You left your phone on the bed," I said. "I saw a notification. I wanted to believe it was about some gig or a campaign. I wanted to believe you. That's getting harder." She rubbed her temples. "You're overthinking everything," she said. "You know what the industry's like right now. They cut costs wherever they can. Sharing a room is not some scandal." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I shot back. "You said you'd be rooming with Saul. You explicitly said that." "She had to cancel last minute," Emma said. "Her kid got sick. The agency didn't update the paperwork. I didn't want you to worry." "Or you didn't want me to ask questions," I replied. Her eyes flashed. "I can't win with you, can I? If I tell you, you freak out. If I don't tell you, you go through my stuff and twist it into something it's not." I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Every sentence she said came with an equal and opposite but. "Did you cheat on me?" I asked, cutting through her defenses. The words tasted like blood. She froze. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the fridge. Pickles jumped up onto a chair, oblivious, and started cleaning his paw. "Emma," I said softly, "please, I need you to be honest." Her shoulders sagged. "It just happened," she whispered. Time did a weird thing then. Everything slowed down and sped up at once. "What does that mean?" I asked. "We were drunk," she said, looking at the floor. "The hotel bar, everyone went down after the sessions. Saul didn't come in the end. It was me and Lucas and some others. And then people started going to bed and we stayed and we talked, and it just happened." "It does just happen," I said, my voice low. "You don't trip and fall into someone. There's 100 little steps before that where you could have stopped." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know," she said. "I know. I'm not saying I'm innocent. I fucked up, Daniel. I know that." "Was it just once?" Silence. "Emma." "No," she breathed. It was. After Melbourne, things were already." She gestured vaguely between us. "He gets me, Daniel. We talk about things I can't talk about with you. I feel like myself with him." I felt physically ill. "So what am I?" I asked. "The guy who pays the water bill?" "That's not fair," she said immediately. "Fair?" I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You've been sleeping with your boss and lying to my face. Forgive me if I'm a bit off my fairness game." We argued for hours. Tearful explanations, angry counterpoints, long stretches where we just sat there, breathing hard, staring at the floor. At one point I said we could try therapy. If we want to salvage anything out of this, we need help. I can't do this alone. She stared at me, eyes red. "You still want to fix this?" she asked, incredulous. "What I want," I said slowly, "is to understand whether the person I thought I married is still in there somewhere. If she is, I want to at least try. If she's gone, then no. But I'm not ready to amputate 6 years without asking if there's another option." She cried harder. "You deserve someone who didn't do this to you," she said. "Stop telling me what I deserve," I snapped. "Tell me what you want." "I don't know," she sobbed. That night she slept in the spare room. I lay awake listening to every creak of the house, every distant car, my brain replaying her words. It just happened. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. Limbo, She said she'd cut contact with him except for necessary work communications. I wanted to believe her, but every time her phone buzzed, my stomach clenched. We went to one couple's therapy session. She spent most of it staring at the floor while I poured my heart out to a stranger. Afterwards, in the car, she said, "I don't like being ganged up on." "It's not 2 against 1, I said. "It's us versus the problem." "It doesn't feel like that," she muttered. Around us, life continued. People still posted brunch photos. My boss still asked why a shipment was delayed. My mum still texted asking when we were coming over for dinner. I told no one. I was too ashamed, too busy clinging to the idea that if I just tried hard enough, I could rewind us back to before Melbourne. Then one Wednesday, she texted me at work. "We need to talk tonight." Not "we have to talk," not "can we chat," "we need to talk." My stomach dropped through the floor. All afternoon, I worked on autopilot, typed emails I don't remember, nodded through a meeting where my assistant had to nudge me because my boss had asked a question, and I'd zoned out. By the time I got home, my hands were buzzing with adrenaline. Emma was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea untouched in front of her. She braided her hair, the way she always did when she was trying to feel in control. "Okay," I said, hanging my keys up. "Talk." "I've been seeing him," she blurted. I laughed, short and disbelieving. "Yeah, I pieced that bit together." She shook her head. "I mean outside of work. I told you I'd stop and I didn't." My chest felt tight. "How long?" "Since Melbourne," she said, "on and off." "On and off," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady, like a light switch, like fidelity. She swallowed. "I tried to end it. I really did. But every time I see him, I feel like myself again. The self I was before all of this." She waved around the kitchen. "Before bills and routines and just everything." "So I make you feel what?" I asked. "Dead." She flinched. "Heavy," she said, "like there's always a to-do list. With Lucas, it's easy. We talk about art and politics and stupid memes. He listens to me. I can be messy and impulsive, and it doesn't feel like a problem to solve." I stared at her. "So your solution is to blow up our marriage?" She looked at me then, really looked. And I could see the decision already made in her eyes. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "I've found a share place closer to the agency. I'm moving out tonight." There was a roaring in my ears. "Tonight," I repeated. "I've been packing during my lunch breaks," she said, shame flickering across her face. "I didn't want to drag it out. I know that will hurt you more." "You didn't want to drag it out," I said numbly, "so you dragged it out for weeks while you fucked him behind my back." Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair," she said, defaulting to that line again. "Stop saying that," I snapped. "Nothing about this is fair. You made a choice. Own it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then stood. "He's outside," she said softly. I thought she meant in the street, waiting to pick her up after we'd talked. I didn't realize he was literally in an Uber at our door until she walked to the hallway and opened it, letting in the warm orange spill of the porch light. That's when I saw him, leaning against the car, hands in pockets, looking everywhere but inside. Something in me went cold. "You brought him here." "I didn't want to take a taxi alone with all my stuff," she said. "I thought if I asked a friend you'd yell at them, and—" "You thought bringing the guy you cheated with to our front door was better," I interrupted. "He's my lift," she said weakly. "He's your affair," I shot back. "Those two things shouldn't overlap." She stared at me, eyes shiny. "I didn't come here to fight," she said. "I came to tell you I'm leaving. I've made up my mind. I thought maybe in time we could be civil." "Civil?" I repeated. "You think there's a version of this where we swap banana bread recipes?" And that's when she said the line that's now stuck to that scene like glue. "It just happened, don't try to stop me," she snapped, voice shaking. She hitched the duffel up higher on her shoulder. "If you love me, let me go." I stood there in the doorway, tea towel twisted in my hands, feeling every cliché movie line she'd just thrown at me land like a slap. "Don't you dare use 'if you love me' as a weapon," I said quietly. "Loving you is exactly why I spent weeks in agony, trying to fix something you'd already decided to walk away from." She opened her mouth, closed it. For a second, she looked like the Emma I'd met at Centrelink, all vulnerability and uncertainty. Then she steeled herself, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and turned away. I watched, frozen, as she walked down the path. Lucas straightened, taking the bag from her gently. I couldn't hear what he said over the blood rushing in my ears. She got into the car without looking back. The door clicked shut behind her. The Uber's indicator blinked twice, then the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street, its red taillights shrinking to nothing. I stood in the open doorway long enough for a moth to start fluttering around the porch light. Eventually, my neighbor from next door walked past, gave me an awkward wave. I stepped back, closed the door carefully, and slid down until I was sitting on the hallway floor, knees up to my chest, tea towel still in my fist. I didn't cry straight away. That came later, in ugly, heaving bursts. What I felt in that moment was empty, like someone had hit mute on the world. The next few weeks are a blur, if I'm honest. Grief isn't linear, it's a washing machine cycle. Some days I could joke with my coworkers, answer emails, even go for a run. Other days I'd open the cupboard and see her favorite mug and have to sit down before my knees gave out. I told people in stages. My boss got a vague "my wife and I are separating, I might be a bit off for a while." My parents got the slightly more detailed version. She was seeing someone else. My mum cried. My dad made a noise like someone had stepped on his foot and said, her loss, in that brusque way men of his generation think is comforting. Telling my little sister hurt the most. She adored Emma. They had this whole thing where they'd send each other TikToks and roast my fashion choices. When I told her, she stared at me for a few seconds like I was speaking a foreign language, then said, "Do you want me to go egg his car?" I laughed, even as my throat tightened. Maybe later. I blocked Emma on everything the day after she left. Not out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but because my therapist, yes, I went back to mine, I'd had a few sessions years ago, said every time you see her name pop up, it's going to rip the scab off. You're allowed to give yourself some space. She still emailed though. Long, rambling paragraphs about how sorry she was, how she'd never meant to hurt me, how it just happened had been a cowardly way of saying she'd been unhappy for a long time, and I hadn't noticed. That line hooked into me, I hadn't noticed. Because she was right in one way, I hadn't. I'd seen the stress, the sighs, the restlessness, and instead of sitting her down and saying, "Hey, something feels wrong, let's talk," I just tried to soothe it with takeout and Netflix. I thought being steady and not adding to her burdens was enough. It was, but here's the thing I'm learning. Her unhappiness wasn't my fault to fix alone. She had a responsibility to bring it to the table, instead of outsourcing it to someone else's bed. One night, about a month after she left, I was on my loneliest behavior, and despite my therapist's advice, I unblocked her Instagram. Her profile picture had changed, from us at a festival to a solo shot of her in front of a mural. I scrolled, heart in my throat. There they were, photos of her at an exhibition opening, at a rooftop bar, at a gig. In several, Lucas was in the background, arm around her, head thrown back laughing. In one they were front and center, his chin on her shoulder, her grin wide. The caption, "Didn't expect this chapter, but grateful for how it's unfolding." I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. There was a time when that could have broken me, when seeing her seemingly happy with him would have sent me spiraling. Weirdly, what I felt instead was something like closure. Not clean, not complete, but enough, because it confirmed what my therapist had been hammering into my skull. She hadn't left because I was worthless. She'd left because the life she wanted had shifted, and instead of trying to bring me along or end things honestly, she took a shortcut. A selfish, painful shortcut. I made myself a deal that night. No more social media stalking. If I wanted to know how she was doing, it had to be through actual conversations months from now, when the dust had settled, not through filtered squares and curated captions. I focused on rebuilding my days. I rearranged the furniture. It sounds small, but it helped. I moved the bed to a different wall, got new covers, turned the old studio into something between a home office and a reading nook. I took down the fairy lights because they made my chest ache, and put up a stupidly big whiteboard where I wrote things like "Pay Rego" and "See Friends." I retaught myself how to cook for one, which was harder than I expected. I'd catch myself picking up 2 plates, 2 sets of cutlery. Now and then I'd accidentally make enough pasta for 4 and end up delivering a container to my sister, because the alternative was watching it congeal in Tupperware while I felt sorry for myself. Somewhere in there, the sharpest edges of the hurt dulled. It was still there, like a bruise you forget about until you bump it. But I could go a few hours, then a full day, without playing the what-if movie in my head. About 2 months post-explosion, I got an email from Emma that wasn't an apology. It was a practical one, about the townhouse. It was in my name, but she'd helped with the deposit. We needed to sort out what that meant now. We agreed to meet at a cafe near the solicitor's office. Neutral ground. I got there early. My hands were sweating, so I kept wiping them on my jeans. When she walked in, my chest did that annoying thing where it both clenched and expanded at once. She looked good, different. Her hair was shorter, a choppy bob. She'd always talked about doing that but said she was too chicken. Her clothes were more artsy, I guess. Layered jewelry, oversized shirt, boots. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. For a few seconds we just stood there awkward. Then we both kind of half laughed and sat. "How are you?" she asked. There was a time when I would have answered that honestly, lonely, angry, strange. Now I just said, "I'm okay. You?" She hesitated. "Also okay," she said. "Work's intense." We talked about the house stuff first, which was oddly less painful. Numbers, percentages, what the solicitor had advised. It was transactional, straightforward. Then when our coffees arrived and we'd signed the last form, there was this pause. The window behind her reflected us, two people who used to be something else. "I'm really sorry," she said suddenly, staring at her hands. "I know I've said it in emails, but I wanted to say it to your face. What I did, the way I did it, you didn't deserve that." Something in my chest loosened a fraction. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I keep replaying that night in my head," she said. At the door, I sounded so cruel, like some villain in a bad movie. "You were scared," I said. The words surprised both of us. She looked up, eyes shiny. I was, she admitted, and selfish. I told myself that because I hadn't been happy for a while, it somehow justified everything. But sitting in therapy, she gave a little half laugh. "Yes, I finally went. On my own. Anyway, I realized there were about 100 points where I could have turned around, or at least told you the truth before I crossed certain lines." We sat with that for a bit. "Do you regret leaving?" I asked before I could stop myself. She took a long time to answer. "No," she said eventually, and weirdly that honesty hurt less than a platitude. "I don't regret leaving. We weren't working, Danny. We were roommates with history. I regret the way I left, and I regret hurting you. A lot." "And Lucas?" I asked. The name tasted less bitter now. She looked down at her coffee. "We're together," she said. "It's complicated. He's messy in ways you're not. There's a lot of drama." She smiled ruefully. "Sometimes I miss the way you just quietly fix things." For a split second, a younger version of me perked up. Maybe she wants to come back. But then I remembered a line my therapist had said. Missing certain qualities about someone doesn't mean you want that relationship again. It means you're grieving the good parts, which is normal. "I'm glad you're figuring out what you need," I said. And I meant it, even if part of me added silently, "Just wish you done it without using my heart as a stepping stone." "Are you seeing anyone?" she asked carefully. I shook my head, no, trying to just be with myself for a bit. She smiled, sad and soft. "You were always better at that than me." We parted with a brief, awkward hug. It was like hugging a coat someone else had already worn, familiar fabric, unfamiliar scent. As I walked home, I realized something had shifted. Not a grand epiphany, just a quiet click. I didn't want her back, not out of pride or anger, but because the version of us I missed didn't exist anymore. She'd outgrown it in one direction, I'd grown in another. That night I sat at my kitchen table, mine now, legally and emotionally, and opened Reddit. I've lurked on relationship subs for years, mostly for the drama and the occasional "oh, it's not just me" moment. I never thought I'd be the one writing an essay-length post on a throwaway. But here I am. If you've made it this far, here's what I'm chewing on. Emma's line at the door, "It just happened, don't try to stop me," wasn't about some uncontrollable force of passion. It was about avoiding responsibility, turning a series of choices into a single passive event. Affairs don't just happen. People reach out, they reply to texts, they agree to one-on-one drinks, they keep secrets. They tell themselves stories about how misunderstood they are at home and how seen they are by this new person. They build little private worlds brick by brick, and then act surprised when those walls shut their partner out. I didn't cause Emma's affair. That sits on her shoulders, but I'm not walking away from this like some saint either. There were times I chose comfort over curiosity. Times I saw her restlessness and thought, if I just give it space, it'll blow over, instead of saying, "Hey, what's going on inside that head of yours?" Next time, and yeah, I'm starting to believe there will be a next time with someone else. I want to do it differently. Not to affair-proof anything, you can't control another adult's integrity, but to stay awake in my own life. To notice when things feel off and speak up even if it's awkward. To not let being comfortable turn into being complacent. If someone reading this is in Emma's position, unhappy, tempted, feeling like you're suffocating in a relationship that once fit, please, for the love of God, don't do what she did. Don't rewrite your partner as the villain in your head to justify sneaking around. Don't tell yourself it just happened. It never just happens. Have the excruciating, honest conversation. Say, "I'm not okay, I'm not happy, I don't know if this is working." Leave if you have to, but leave before you crawl into someone else's bed. And if you're in my position, standing in the doorway while the person you loved walks away with someone else, know this: their choice is not a referendum on your worth. It's a reflection of where they are in their own messy, unfinished journey. It's been almost 6 months now. I still have bad days. Yesterday I burned my tongue on soup and then cried way harder than the soup warranted because I suddenly remembered how Emma used to blow on spoons and say temperature check before letting me taste whatever she was cooking. Grief hides in the smallest details. But I also have good days. I went to a trivia night last week and realized halfway through I hadn't thought about her in hours. I'm planning a hiking trip with friends, something I'd always put off because she hated camping. I bought new sheets and no one but me decided the color. I'm not over it yet. Maybe I never will be, not completely. She was my first big love. She was my Centrelink Steps biscuits and my park wedding and my teal studio wall. That doesn't vanish. What's changing slowly is the ratio. There are more memories now that don't have her in them. More moments where the main character in my own life is actually me. So yeah, she said, it just happened. Don't try to stop me, and left with another man. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. But what I can do, what I'm learning to do, is not let that one scene be the whole story of who I am.